so in today's lecture, we'll be seeing understanding partition. We'll be seeing the politics and the memories and experiences that happened after partition, before partition, what were the causes of partition, all these things will be looked into. So in this chapter, we will examine the history of partition, why and how it happened, as well as the harrowing experiences of ordinary people during the period of 1946 to 1950 and beyond. So we'll be looking at some of the life incidents of some people in this chapter. Also discuss how the history of these experiences have been reconstructed by taking into people and interviewing them. That is through the use of oral history. At the same time, we will point out the strengths and limitations of oral history. Interviews can tell us about certain aspects of society's past, of which we may know very little or nothing from other types of sources. But they may not reveal very much. See, even though there are interviews, there are written documents, the correct aspect or the truth or what really happened still remains a mystery. Okay, in some instances. Okay, I'll read about some examples. Some instance. Okay, this is an interesting incident. The researcher's second story is about the manager of a youth hostel in Lahore. Okay, and I had gone to the hostel looking for accommodation. I had promptly declared my citizenship. You are an Indian, so I cannot allot your room, but I can offer you a tea and a story, said the manager. I couldn't refuse such a tempting offer. In the early 1950s, I was posted in Delhi. The manager began. I was all ears, okay. I was working as a clerk in the Pakistani High Commission there, and I had been asked by by a Lahori friend to deliver a rukka, written means a handwritten note, to his erstwhile neighbor who now resided in Paharganj in Delhi. One day, I rode out on my bicycle towards Paharganj, and just as I crossed the cathedral means church, at the central secretariat, spotting a Sikh cyclist, I asked him in Punjabi, Sardaji, the way to Paharganj, please. So, are you a refugee? He asked. No, I came from Lahore. I am Iqbal Ahmed. Iqbal Ahmed from Lahore. Stop. That stop sounded like a brute order to me, and I instantly thought, now I will be gone. The Sikh will finish me off. But there was no escaping the situation, so I stopped. The burly Sikh came running to me and gave me a mighty hug. Eyes moist, he said, for quite a few years now, I have not met a Punjabi Musliman. I have been longing to meet one, but you cannot find Punjabi speaking Muslimans here. That is such a really good story. Okay, and now we will go to what led to the partition. The narratives just presented point to the pervasive violence that characterize partition. Okay, the violent figures, the violent result, aftermath of the partition. Several 100,000 people were killed, and innumerable women were raped and abducted. Millions were uprooted, transformed into refugees in alien lands. Okay, scholarly guesses vary from 2 lakh to 5 lakh people. In all probability, about 15 million had to move across hastily constructed frontiers separating India and Pakistan. Okay, and they had to begin their life from scratch. Was this simply a partition, or more or less orderly constitutional arrangement? An agreed upon division of territories and assets? Was it a pre-planned agreement? Was it a constitutional change? All these need to be looked into. Okay, well organized, or should be called a 16-month civil war, recognizing that there were well organized forces on both sides and concentrated attempts to wipe out entire populations as enemies. Okay, we need to look into all these stereotypes or these questions, the power of stereotypes. India haters in Pakistan and Pakistan haters in India. So now we are looking into how Indians are viewed in Pakistan and Pakistans are viewed in India. India haters in Pakistan and Pakistan haters in India are both products of partition. At times, some people mistakenly believe that the loyalties of Indian Muslims lie with Pakistan. The stereotype of extraterritorial, pan Islamic loyalties comes fused with other highly objectionable ideas. Muslims are cruel, bigoted, unclean, descendants of invaders, while Hindus are kind, liberal, pure children of the invaded. The journalist R. Murphy has shown that similar stereotypes are there in Pakistan as well. According to him, some Pakistanis feel that the Muslims are fair, brave, monotheists, that is, they believe in single God, and meat eaters, while Hindus are dark, cowardly, polytheists, many gods, they worship many gods, and vegetarian. Some of these stereotypes predate partition, but there is no would doubt that they are immensely strengthened because of 19. It was there before, even before the partition, and after partition, it became a lot stronger. Every myth of these constructions have been systematically critiqued by the historians. Okay, partitions generated memories, hatreds, stereotypes, and identities that still continue to shape the history of people on both sides of the border. Okay, the relationship between Pakistan and India has been profoundly shaped by this legacy of partition. Perceptions of communities on both sides have been structured by the conflicting memories of these momentous times. Okay, so, how did this happen? And why did this happen? Some historians, both Indian and Pakistani, suggest that Muhammad Ali Jinnah's theory and the Hindus and Muslims in colonial India constituted two separate nations can be projected back into medieval history. The emphasis on the events of 1947 were immediately connected to the long history of Hindu-Muslim conflict throughout the medieval and modern times. So we have looked into the medieval history in our channel. So do search for it. We will see the changes that were brought by the coming of Islam before the advent of Islam. All these things are dealt with this in the videos. So do look into it, so you will get a better understanding of what really happened in the partition, or what were the social causes, the mentality of the people. Okay, it also does not take into account the changing circumstances that shape people's thinking. Some scholars see partition as a culmination of a communal politics that started developing in the opening decades of the 20th century. They suggest that separate electorates of Muslims created by colonial government, Murli reforms, okay, and expanded in 1990. We will see all these reforms in when we are discussing the polity chapters. So even I need to look into it again. I studied it, but I forgot. Montemerlo, especially the separate electorates by Lord Minto, Molly Minto reforms, and crucially shaped the nature of communal politics. Separate electorates meant that Muslims could now elect their own representatives in designated constituencies. This created a temptation of politicians working within this system to use sectarian slogans. Okay, religious identities thus acquired a functional use within a modern political system. Okay, this caused an introduction. The separate electorates, we can guess that it created a sense of that our community should be represented, our ideals should be put forward, our religion should be put forward. All these kind of ideas were put forward in the sectorial electorates. Okay, communal identities were consolidated by a host of other developments in the early 20th century. During the 1920s and early 1930s, tension grew around a number of issues. Muslims were angered by the music before mosque. These are some incidents. Okay, by the cow protection movement and by the efforts of Arya Samaj to bring back the Hindu fold. Shuddhi, those who were recently converted to Islam. So there were tensions in the 1920s and 1930s. Okay, and okay, here is another important topic: communalism. Communalism is also another topic that is in our GS paper, so we will read through it. There are many aspects in our identity. You are a girl or a boy, all of you are young persons. You belong to a certain village, city, district, or state and speak certain languages. You are Indians, but you are also world citizens. Income levels differ from family to family, hence, all of us belong to some social class or the other. Most of us have a religion, and caste may play an important role in our life. Yes, in other words, our identities have numerous features, they are complex. There are times, however, when people attach greater significance to certain chosen aspects of their identity. So, some people see themselves as more religious, they see I am a Muslim, it is part of my identity. Rather than when we introduce ourselves, we will say our name. So after that, we will say, I am a Muslim, I am a Hindu. All these aspects are included in our identity. Okay, communalism refers to, that is only a part of identity. So communalism refers to a politics that seeks to unify one community around a religious identity in hostile opposition to another community. Okay, so when you are doing something, or collectively doing, a certain community is doing, collectively doing something that can hurt a particular other community, that is called communalism. Okay, based on religious identity, it seeks to define this community identity as fundamental. Seeing your religion is superior than the others, it attempts to consolidate this identity and present it as natural, as if people were born into the identity. See, when we are born, we are naked, we have no identity, we don't have, we may have a name. But the religious identity put us as we were born into a Christian household, we were born into a Hindu household. So you are chosen to be a Hindu, you are chosen to be a Muslim. All these aspects are put in your head. Okay, so we need religion is your inner feeling. It is not never an identity. It is your relationship with your God. Nothing more than that. As the identity does not evolve through history over time. In order to unify the community, communism suppresses distinctions within the community and emphasizes the essential unity of the community against other communities. One could say communism nurtures a politics of hatred for an identified other. Hindus on the case of Muslim communism and Muslims on the case of Hindu communism. This hatred feeds a politics of violence. Communism then is a particular kind of politicization of religious identity and ideology that seeks to promote conflict between religious communities. In the context of a multi-religious country, the phrase religious nationalism can come to acquire a similar meaning. In such a country, any attempt to use a religious community as nation, see, putting your religion as a state religion, or say only Hindus can reside in India, or say only Muslims can reside in Pakistan, all these things are kind of hurting other community. Such kind of practices need to be avoided. The provincials. Now we will be looking at the history of partition. Okay. In 1935, elections to the provincial legislatures were held for the first time. Only about 10 to 12% of the population enjoyed. It was limited franchise, the right to vote. The Congress did well in the elections, winning a majority of 5 out of 11 provinces. In 5 out of 11 provinces and forming governments in 7 out of them. Okay, it did badly for the constituencies served by Muslims, but the Muslim League also fared poorly. Only 4.4% of the total Muslim vote cast in this election. See, when we look at the vote share, there is an understanding. Only 4.4% of the vote of Muslims went to Muslim League, particularly a party that represented Muslims. So with this we can say, the Muslims in that time in our country never identified themselves to a particular party. They actually more lenient towards Congress, we can say. Okay, that is my viewpoint. Yours may be different, so I'm just adding my point of view. So the League failed to win a single seat in the northwestern frontier province and could capture only 2 out of 84 reserved constituencies in Punjab and 3 out of 33 in Sindh. In the United Provinces, the Muslim League wanted to form a joint government with the Congress, but Congress had a majority, so they rejected it. But this rejection was a tool in the hands of Jinnah, for the instance that there was he considered himself to be a sole spokesperson for Muslims, and he demanded that Muslims under the Hindus in India would be seen as a minority and their representation will be limited. So he demanded a separate state. Okay, all these things, and from then on he tried to address the Muslims. He tried to what we can say, he tried to bring the Muslims together under that identity, and here we can see that These ideas were no means universally shared lower down to the party. See, moreover, while leading Congress leaders in the late 1930s insisted more than ever before on the need of secularism, Congress leaders wanted secularism. This idea was no means universally shared. Even to the lower party members, they never understood secularism. Okay, or even the all Congress ministers, even now by all the Congress leaders, Maulana Azad, an important Congress leader, pointed out that members of the Congress were not allowed to join the League. League was out of an area for Congress members. Yet congressmen were active in the Hindu Mahasabha, at least in the central provinces, present day Madhya Pradesh. Only in the December of 1938. So 1930s, we can see membership prevented for League. In 1938, Congress Working Committee declared that Congress members could not be members of the Mahasabha. Okay. And incidentally, that time the RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and Hindu Mahasabha all were gaining popularity, and there were also 1 lakh trained and highly disciplined kids pledged an ideology of Hindu nationalism. They were convinced that India was a land of Hindus. Okay, the Pakistan resolution. Pakistan demand was formalized gradually. In 23rd March 1940, the League moved a resolution demanding a measure of autonomy for the Muslim majority areas of the subcontinent. So it was never in the initial stages a separate country. It was like an autonomous region for Muslims under the centralized Indian Union. Okay, that was the whole point. And on March 1940, 1st March of 1941, I opposed to a Pakistan that would mean Muslim Raj here and Hindu Raj here. So who said this? It was like, in fact, Sikandar Hayat Khan, Punjab Premier and leader of the Unionist Party, who had drafted the resolution declared on Punjab Assembly speech that he opposed to a Pakistan that means Muslim Raj here and Hindu Raj elsewhere. If Pakistan means unalloyed Muslim Raj, he was actually opposed to the Muslim Raj in Punjab, then I will have nothing to do with it. Okay. And we can see another origins of Pakistan demanded by Urdu poet Muhammad Iqbal, who is the writer of Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara. Okay. In his presidential address to the Muslim League in 1930, the poet spoke of a need of the northwestern Indian Muslim state. Iqbal, however, was not visualizing the emergence of a new country in that speech, but a reorganization of Muslim majority areas in northwestern India into an autonomous unit within a single loosely structured Indian federation. Okay, they wanted to be part of an India, but there should be some area allotted for the Muslim community. Okay, so now we are seeing how the partition happened. Okay, suddenness of partition. We have seen that the league itself was vague, but about its demand, there was no proper idea about what the option should be about Muslim area or Muslim majority area. Okay, initially even Muslim leaders did not seriously raise the demand for Pakistan as a sovereign state. In the beginning, Jinnah himself may have seen the Pakistan idea was bargaining counter, useful for blocking possible British concessions to the Congress and gaining additional favors for the Muslims. The pressure of the Second World War on the British delayed the negotiations for independence. Okay, and post-war developments. And there was also some August offer that after the war the British will leave, and we will discuss about partition and all after the war. Okay, when negotiations were began again in 1945 after the war, British agreed to create an entirely Indian Central Executive Council, except for Viceroy and the Commander-in-Chief of the Arms as a preliminary step towards full independence. Discussions about transfer of power broke down due to Jinnah's unrelenting demand. See, when we read this chapter, we will find that only Jinnah, because of the stubbornness of Jinnah, we can say Pakistan was born. Okay, no other Muslim leaders actually were highly demanding about the separate Muslim state. Okay, and given the existing political situation, the League's first demand was quite extraordinary. What was the first demand? A demand for the League had an absolute right to choose all the Muslim members of the Executive Council, and that there should be kind of communal veto in the council. These decisions opposed by Muslims needing to two-third majority. Given the existing political situation, League's first demand was quite extraordinary. to a large section of the nationalist Muslims supported the Congress. Okay, its delegation for these discussions was headed by who? Maulana Azad. And in West Punjab, members of the Unionist Party were largely Muslims. The British had no intention of annoying the Unionists, who still controlled the Punjab government and were consistently loyal to the British. Provincial elections were again held in 1946. The Congress swept the general constituencies, capturing 91.3% of the non-Muslim vote. The League's success in the seats reserved for Muslims were equally spectacular, won all 30 reserved constituencies in the center with 86% of all the Muslim vote. Okay, and the 442 out of 509 seats in the provinces. Only as late as 1946, therefore, did the League establish itself as a dominant party among Muslim voters. That should be noted. Okay, and the claim of sole spokesman for India's Muslims. About 10 to 12% of the entire population enjoyed right to vote in the provincial elections. It was a limited franchise at that time. Okay, a possible alternative for partition. On March 1946, British cabinet sent a three-member mission to Delhi to examine the League's demand and suggest a suitable political framework for a free India. The cabinet mission toured the country for 3 months and recommended a loose three-tier confederation. India was to remain united. It was to have a weak central government controlling only foreign affairs, defense, and communications, with the existing provincial assemblies being grouped into three sections while electing the constituent assembly. So we will look into the sections. Section A, Hindu majority provinces. Section B and C for the Muslim majority provinces of the northwest and the northeast, respectively. The sections or groups of provinces would comprise various regional units. They would have the power to set up intermediate level executive legislatures of their own. See, there is a map given over here. This was what mission was talking about. Section C, which now we can see on the eastern side of the country, which later formed into Bangladesh, and this side you can see the Pakistan, and this area was a Muslim majority area, and this was section B, and this is section C. These two areas were dominated by Muslims, and the red color area is called in the majority area, and it is called section A, which included the princely state also. Okay. And towards partition. After withdrawing its support to the cabinet mission plan, Muslim League decided on direct action for winning its Pakistan demand. It announced on 16th August 1946 a direct action day. On this day, riots broke out in Calcutta, lasting several days and leaving several thousand people dead. Okay, it was on March 1947 the Congress High Command voted on dividing Punjab into two halves, one with the Muslim majority and the other with Hindu Sikh majority. And it asked for the application of a simple principle of Bengal. By this time, given the numbers game, many Sikh leaders and congressmen in Punjab were convinced that partition was a necessary evil. Otherwise, they would be swamped by Muslim majorities and Muslim leaders would dictate terms. In Bengal, to a section of the Bengali Hindus wanted political power to remain with them, began to fear the permanent rule of Muslims. Okay, since they were a numerical minority. So they never wanted the political dominance of Muslims. And the bloodbath continues. There was a confusion going on these areas because the power was changing from British to Indians at that time. British officials did not know how to handle the situation. They were unwilling to take decisions and hesitant to intervene. When panic-stricken people appealed for help, British officials asked them to contact Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, or Jinnah. Nobody knew who could exercise authority, and the British were busy preparing to quit India. The problems were compounded because Indian soldiers and policemen and the police also began to show themselves as members of certain religious communities, and they began to attack other religious community. Now we see the man arriving in the scene, the leader, the one-man army. Amidst all this turmoil, one man, valiant efforts at restoring communal harmony bore fruit. The the 77-year-old Gandhiji decided to stake all in the bid to vindicate life from principle of non-violence. Okay, and he moved from village to village, asking the Hindus and Muslims to remain peaceful. And there were instances. Okay, we will see this one. A Delhi Muslim, Shahid Anwari Dalwai, compelled to flee in a dirty overcrowded camp to Purana Killa, likened Gandhiji's arrival in Delhi on 9 September 1947. The arrival of the rains after a particularly long, harsh summer. Dalwai recalled in his memoir how Muslims said to one another, Delhi will now be saved. On 28 November 1947, on the occasion of Guru Nanak's birthday. So, this is a very important event. When Gandhiji went to address a meeting of Sikhs at Guru Dwara, he noticed that there was no Muslim in the Chandni Chowk Road, the heart of old Delhi. What could be more shameful for us? He asked during the speech that evening than the fact that not a single Muslim could be found in Chandni Chowk. Gandhiji continued to be in Delhi, fighting the mentality of those who wish to drive out every Muslim from the city, seeing them as Pakistani. Now he began to fast to bring about a change of heart. Amazingly, many Hindu and Sikh migrants fasted with him. Okay, and this led to many Delhi Muslims to come back, and they also recall this event. So, in the phase of crisis, one man stood up. This led to the peace, coming back of peace in the country. So, it is our duty when our crisis strike in our country, when our Muslim brothers and Hindu brothers fight against each other, it is our duty to stand up and maintain peace. Okay. And gendering, this woman part, the effect of woman on partition, any aspect related to woman is a very important topic under UPSC. Okay, UPSC loves to ask questions about the life of woman. Okay, in the last decade and a half, historians have been examining the experience of ordinary people during partition. Scholars have written about the harrowing experience of women in these violent times. Women were raped, abducted, sold, often many times over, forced to settle down in a new life with strangers in unknown circumstances. Deeply traumatized by all that they had undergone, some began to develop new family bonds in their changed circumstances. But the Indian and Pakistani governments were insensitive to the complexities of the human relationship. Believing women to be on the wrong side of the border, they now tore them away from their new relatives and sent them back to their earlier families and locations. They did not consult the concerned women, undermining their right to make decisions regarding their own lives. According to one estimate, 30,000 women were recovered overall, 20,000 Muslim women in India, and 8,000 Hindu and Sikh women in Pakistan, in an operation that ended as late as 1954. So, here is another story. Okay, in one instance, a Sikh youth who had run amok during the partition pursued a massacring crowd to let him take away a young, beautiful Muslim girl. They got married and slowly fell in love with each other. Gradually, memories of her parents who had been killed and her former life faded. They were happy together and a little boy was born. Soon, however, social workers and the police laboring to recover abducted women began to track down the couple. They made inquiries in the Sikh's home district in Jalandhar. He got scent of it and the family ran away to Calcutta. In Calcutta, they thought they would be safe, but the police arrived there. And they went back to some obscure Punjab village, hoping that the police would fail to shadow them. But the police caught up with them and began to question them. His wife, who was expecting again, and nearing her time, the Sikh sent the little boy to her mother and took his wife to a sugarcane field. He made her as comfortable as he could in a pit, while the lady with the gun waiting for the police determined not to lose her while he was alive. In the pit, he delivered her with his own hands. The next day, she ran a high fever, and in 3 days, she was dead. He had not dared to take her to the hospital. He was so afraid the social workers and the police would take her away. And another instance is preserving honor. Times therefore, the other community members were seen as enemies. Okay. At times therefore, when men feared that their women, wives, daughters, sisters would be violated by the enemy, they killed the women themselves. Urvashi Bhattualia, in her book The Other Side of Silence, narrates one such gruesome event in the village of Toa Khalsa, Rawalpindi district, during partition. In this Sikh village, 90 women are said to have voluntarily jumped into a well rather than to fall into enemy hands. The migrant refugees from this village still commemorate the deaths of the women. They see them as martyrdom or martyrs. Women uh, recounted in the audience of men, women, and children. Women are exhorted to remember the sacrifice and bravery of their sisters and to cast themselves in the same mold. For the community of saviors or survivors, the remembrance ritual helps them to keep the memory alive. What such rituals do seek to remember, however, are the stories of all those who did not wish to die and had to end their lives against their will. There may have been people who did never wanted to die, okay, but as other people did, they also jumped into the well, okay. Regional variations are there. The experience of ordinary people have been discussing on far related to the northwestern, because initially this northwestern frontier there wasn't any particular significant amount of Muslims in those areas. But once the partition took place, there was a displacement of huge number of Hindu and Sikhs from the region into India, and also many Indian Muslims families of Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Hyderabad, who were Urdu speaking, and going, they went to Pakistan. But many of them also stayed in India. Okay, so and we will see the human aspect of this all this partition and all we have seen. Even though partition took place, there were instances when without looking religion, the people helped each other. We have seen in the case of the Sikh, in the case of Iqbal Ahmed. Hmm? He hugged the Punjabi Muslim. All this aspect gives a sense of hope and love towards our fellow humans. Okay, and there are references. These are references or accounts from where all these details uh, were found about the partition. So just go through it, and nothing much of an important. Especially we need when we are learning this chapter, we need to learn the causes of partition, how women were affected, and how was the political situation. All these aspects are to be dealt with while reading this chapter. So with this I conclude today's video. I hope everybody understood today's lecture. So until next time, we will see with a new chapter. God bless you all. Jai Hind.